Welcome to this flipped lecture. This lecture is designed to help prepare you for the rubber ducky science activity we will be doing the next time you come to class. Please feel free to have a pen and paper ready to take notes, and feel free to jot down any questions that you may have. To prepare you for this activity, I will be explaining buoyancy and its role in floating, sinking, and density. Each of these components are essential in understanding how objects float. This way, you will be proficient in how to compare and contrast the ability to sink or float as a property of matter. In order for an object to float in water, it has to be buoyant. So what buoyancy is it is the object having the ability or tendency to float in water or some other fluid. In order for an object to be buoyant, it has to have a lower density than that of the water that it is sitting in. So density, in order to understand buoyancy, you have to understand what density is too. Density is a measurement that compares the amount of matter an object has compared to its volume. This measurement can be computed using the formula mass divided by volume. For example, a brick has a mass of 433 grams and a volume of 200 centimeters cubed. Using this formula, you will find that this object has a density of 2.165 grams per centimeters cubed. In order for an object to float, it must have a lower density than water. In order for it to sink, it must have a higher density than water. So how do boats float? How is it possible that a boat can have lower density than water? Well, when an object enters water, two forces act upon it. There's a downward force, which is gravity, that's determined by the object's weight. There's also an upward force, which is buoyancy, that's determined by the weight of the water displaced by the object. An object will float if the gravitational or downward force is less than the buoyancy or the upward force. So, in other words, an object will float if it weighs less than the amount of water it displaces. This explains why a rock will sink while a huge boat will float. The rock is heavy, but it displaces only a little water. It sinks because its weight is greater than the weight of the small amount of water it displaces. A huge boat, on the other hand, will float because even though it weighs a lot, it displaces a huge amount of water that weighs even more. Plus, boats are designed specifically so that they will displace enough water to assure that they'll float easily. So this concludes our lesson. To review, an object must be buoyant in order to float in water. In order for an object to be buoyant, it must have a lower density than water. If it has a higher density than water, it will sink. Boats are able to stay afloat because they displace enough water to remain buoyant. If you have any questions, be sure to have them ready for me when we begin class. Thank you.